I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from. Thanks for watching. The call to end my final mission came sooner than expected. One moment, I was reviewing security protocols in the operations room in Afghanistan. The next, I was packing my duffel bag. After 40 years in uniform, I was used to quick departures, but this time felt different. I wasn't just leaving a mission. I was leaving behind the only life I had known since I was 18. In my jacket pocket, my father's pocket watch pressed against my chest, the same one he had given me before my first deployment, with the words, "Always come home, Shirley." I had time and again, but this return was unlike any before. Colonel Shirley Grant was officially retiring, and I hadn't told anyone, not even my son Mark. On the overnight flight to Miami, the hum of engines stretched out like an endless ribbon through the dark sky. Dawn crept across the Atlantic, and I thought about knocking on Mark's door after 2 long years apart. His smile, the way his hazel eyes crinkled at the corners, like his father's, carried me through the turbulence. When we landed, the Florida heat wrapped around me like a heavy blanket. I gave the taxi driver his Naples address, a quiet neighborhood he had moved to 5 years ago. Yet as we drove through streets lined with neat lawns and cheerful homes, I felt an unexpected tightness in my chest. Mark's house stood out immediately. The grass was overgrown, the mailbox tilted and stuffed, the blue paint faded and peeling. It looked abandoned. As I stepped out, his neighbor Mrs. Wilson spotted me. Her pale face and hesitant tone unsettled me before she even spoke. "You don't know, do you?" she whispered, glancing at Mark's neglected house. My hand tightened around my father's watch as I braced for her words. "Mark's been in the ICU for 2 weeks. They took him by ambulance in the middle of the night." Shock left me momentarily speechless. When I asked about his wife, Jennifer Mrs. Wilson's expression hardened. "She's been on a yacht in the Keys posting pictures, shopping, partying. Not once has she been here." Her voice broke off, and I could only nod numbly. I don't remember how I thanked her or climbed back into the taxi. One moment, I was smelling roses in her immaculate garden. The next, I was pushing through the hospital's sliding glass doors, my heartbeat pounding like a drum. The nurse's quiet tone when she said 5th floor room 512 sent dread curling in my chest. The ICU hallway echoed with beeping monitors and hurried footsteps. Inside the room, my son lay pale and shrunken, his once strong frame reduced by illness. Tubes and wires snaked around him like cruel reminders of fragility. The doctor introduced himself with tired eyes and did not soften his words. Advanced gastric cancer terminal already spread to the liver and lymph nodes. I moved to his side, brushing his fragile hand with my fingers. His eyelids fluttered open, hazel eyes dim, but still holding recognition. "Mom," he whispered, voice dry and cracked. "You're really here." I took his hand, fully promising I would not leave. A faint smile touched his lips as he breathed, "I love you, Mom." Before I could reply, the monitor's steady rhythm collapsed into one long tone. I froze as nurses rushed in, their hands pressing against his chest, the loudspeaker announcing, "Code Blue ICU room 512. Minutes dragged like hours until the doctor emerged, face heavy with defeat. "We did everything we could," he said. The weight of my father's watch in my hand felt unbearable. I had come home too late. The drive back to Mark's house blurred past palm trees and blue sky. I held a plastic bag of his belongings in my lap, wallet, watch, phone, wedding band, as though clutching pieces of him would stop the world from tilting. The house looked worse in the harsh sunlight, its silence pressing against me as I unlocked the door. Inside, the air was stale curtains, drawn dishes stacked with sour smells, photos stripped from mantles, dust covering everything. Nothing resembled the orderly home I remembered. In the kitchen, I found a tower of unopened mail, shut-off warnings, overdue credit cards, mortgage notices. "Mark, had never been careless with money. Each envelope tightened my chest. Among them lay a wedding photo, Mark's smile radiant Jennifer dazzling in her white dress. I stared at the image, unable to reconcile it with the woman partying on yachts while my son lay dying. Something inside me hardened. I began searching the house for answers, determined to uncover the truth of what had happened while I was gone. I started in Mark's office. The desk held a laptop password protected, but beside it lay receipts stacked in careless piles. My hands trembled as I read them. A $75,000 yacht rental in Key West jewelry worth nearly $50,000 from Cartier dinners at oceanfront resorts, luxury boutiques all charged to Mark's credit card in the exact days he had been lying in the ICU. Each receipt was a dagger, proving Jennifer had been draining his accounts while he fought for his life. In the master bedroom, the evidence multiplied. Mark's side of the closet was neat suits, weekend jeans, reading glasses on the nightstand. Jennifer's side was half-empty, expensive hangers, discarded shopping bags strewn across the floor. It looked like she had packed in a rush, taking only valuables. Prescription bottles in the bathroom told another story. Hydrocodone nausea medication, stomach acid pills barely touched. He had been sick for months, managing pain without anyone to care for him. I sat at the kitchen table, sorting through the unopened mail. Near the bottom was an insurance claim denial, sloppily resealed. A CT scan and consultation had been rejected as not medically necessary. Someone had opened it and done nothing. Rage pressed against my ribs, but my military training kept me steady. I dialed Jennifer's number. Her face appeared on video, tanned and smirking against the backdrop of a yacht party, music and laughter behind her. "Well, look who finally decided to call," she said. I stared at her until her smile faltered. "Mark's gone," I said flatly. She shrugged, sipping a drink. It was inevitable. He'd been sick. Nothing anyone could do. I mentioned the charges on his card. She laughed. "I'm his wife, Shirley. What's his is mine. That's how marriage works." Her carelessness was worse than cruelty. I leaned toward the camera. "That was your last party on my dime." Before she could reply, I ended the call. At the hospital later, they allowed me time alone with Mark before the funeral home arrived. His body looked peaceful without tubes, but it was only a shell. I whispered apologies, promising him I would make this right. On the table lay his wedding ring engraved, "Forever yours, Jay." I slipped it into my pocket beside my father's watch. One had given everything the other had only taken. Back at the house, I found more receipts, bills, prescriptions, evidence piling like ammunition. Then I discovered a leather portfolio with Mark's initials. Inside, tucked carefully, was a durable power of attorney he had granted me before my last deployment. Dated and notarized, it was still valid. My grief sharpened into resolve. I had authority. I had a mission. The next morning, I drove to Tampa, straight to Colonel Richard Hayes, my former commanding officer turned military financial administrator. His handshake was firm, his eyes sharp as ever. I set down the folder of evidence. "My son died yesterday," I said. "His wife spent his money while he lay in the ICU. I need everything frozen, now." Richard did not hesitate. For 40 minutes, he called bank managers, cut through bureaucracy with military precision, and leaned on connections that respected his voice. One by one, accounts froze, cards canceled, payments suspended. He prioritized Mark's mortgage, ensuring the house would not be lost. At last, he pushed a printout across the desk. "All accounts secured. Balances transferred to a holding account in your name as power of attorney." The first real breath since my arrival escaped me. "Thank you, Richard." "Don't thank me yet," he warned. "She'll come at you hard. Women like that never give up money without a fight." He was right. By the time I reached the parking lot, Jennifer was already calling. Her voicemails escalated from curses to threats, then softened into pleas. Mother to daughter-in-law, she cooed. Let's work this out. Not once did she say Mark's name. Not once did she express grief. When I returned to Naples, Mrs. Wilson offered quiet kindness. Her son Thomas had visited Mark at the hospital bringing books and a radio. At least someone cared enough, she said softly. Her practical offer to help with the yard nearly broke my composure. That night in Mark's office, I dug deeper. In the bottom drawer, I found his leather-bound notebook filled with meticulous entries, thousands here for Jennifer's medical procedure, more for roof repairs, car transmission, even her mother's surgery. Cross-checking with statements, the truth chilled me. The procedure was a spa visit. The repairs, a boutique purchase. Her mother had died 3 years ago. Every entry was a lie. On Mark's phone, I uncovered a screenshot of a conversation between Jennifer and a friend named Alicia. Might as well enjoy his money while I can. Doctor says he won't last long. Already started moving funds to my personal account. The date was 5 weeks earlier. It was no longer grief that guided me. It was discipline and clarity. Jennifer had declared war on my son. Now she would face me. By morning, I had everything gathered into a file: receipt statements, the notebook entries, and Jennifer's damning text. I called Richard again. I need a lawyer, I told him. He recommended Edward Martinez, a former JAG attorney turned bulldog in civilian court. That same afternoon, I was in Martinez's office, sliding the evidence across his desk. His face hardened as he read. This is systematic exploitation of a terminally ill spouse, he said. We'll file for emergency control of the estate today. But be prepared. Cases like this get ugly. Martinez explained our path freeze assets, contest Jennifer's claim as sole heir, and pursue fraud charges. He warned that Jennifer would almost certainly try to claim Mark's life insurance, nearly $500,000, through his employer. My stomach turned at the thought. Mark had also left a private policy naming me as beneficiary years ago. At least one thing she couldn't touch. That night, Jennifer called again, her voice sharp. Where is my money? She demanded. Safe, I replied calmly. Away from you. She laughed bitterly. I'm his wife. Everything is mine by law. House, cars, accounts, all mine. When I asked if she had ever truly loved Mark, she scoffed. Love is for people who can't afford better options. Mark was convenient until he got sick. Her words burned, but they gave me strength. I found your messages to Alicia, I told her. Silence, then fury. You can't prove anything, she snapped. I was gathering evidence against insurgents before you were born, I answered coldly. Trust me, Jennifer. I know how to prove things. I hung up my resolve, unshakable. The next morning, Martinez and I stood in court. Jennifer arrived in blackface, composed in a mask of widowhood. Beside her sat Gregory Pearson, a notorious divorce attorney. Judge Winters presided, steel-gray hair and sharp eyes, taking in everything. Martinez presented our case methodically, receipts of reckless spending, the investigator's report on her past audio recordings where she admitted exploiting Mark. A murmur spread through the courtroom as her voice played cold and unmistakable, already moving his funds while he wastes away. Pearson argued she was a grieving wife, legally entitled to joint assets. He claimed Mark wasn't of sound mind when revising his will. But when the judge asked my intentions, I stood tall. My son's wishes were clear. He established trusts for architectural education. I intend to honor them and protect his legacy from further exploitation. Judge Winters ruled in my favor, granting me temporary control of all estate assets. Jennifer exploded, shouting, "That money is mine!" Bailiffs moved closer as the judge warned her to control herself. Jennifer turned to me with eyes full of hate. "You'll regret this, Shirley. You have no idea who you're dealing with." Outside, Martinez reminded me round one was ours, but the war had only begun. His warning proved true. By the time we returned to Mark's house, Jennifer and 2 hired men had broken in. Drawers were overturned valuables stuffed into bags. She sneered when she saw me. "Just collecting my things." She deliberately dropped a framed photo of Mark shattering the glass. Her words cut deep. "He waited by the phone every birthday, hoping you'd call. He made excuses for you." Her cruelty hit its mark, but discipline held me steady. "Police are on their way," I said. Martinez backed me up, citing the judge's order. Jennifer left with her men, smashing another vase as she went. "The police documented everything. We'll file charges the officer promised." That evening, I swept broken glass from the floor, my hands trembling not from fear, but from grief. Jennifer's accusations about missed birthdays gnawed at me. My military career had cost me moments with Mark, but I remembered his words at the end of every call, "Proud of you, Mom." That was our language of love. He had understood even when distance kept us apart. Richard called later that night with news. He had uncovered a second mortgage Jennifer had taken out in Mark's name for nearly $200,000. The money had vanished into shell companies through the Cayman Islands. "This isn't just fraud," he warned. "It looks like organized crime. Jennifer may be part of a larger operation." His words changed everything. I wasn't only fighting for Mark's memory anymore. I might be fighting something far larger and far more dangerous. But I had faced adversaries before. Jennifer had made one critical mistake. She underestimated me. The realization that Jennifer was tied to something larger than personal greed gave me a new sense of mission. The next morning, I methodically searched Mark's office again. In the closet behind dusty manuals, I found a heavy fireproof safe. The combination was his habit, my birth date. Inside were documents, his passport medals, and a stack of USB drives. On one, neatly labeled, was a file of financial backups. Another, marked Gen Background, stunned me. It was a private investigator's report. Jennifer's history was darker than I imagined. Daughter of a once wealthy family ruined by scandal. A trail of failed marriages to older wealthy men, debts hidden beneath her polished exterior. One husband had died suddenly, another had disappeared abroad. Mark had confronted her months earlier, but she had twisted reality, making him doubt his sanity. Notes in his handwriting said, "She says I'm paranoid. Maybe the doctors are right." Gaslighting systematic and cruel. Hours later, I discovered even more. In the utility room hidden behind boxes was a door to a small underground storage space. The floor looked recently patched. My instincts sharpened. Using a screwdriver, I pried open the slab, revealing a metal box with a note in Mark's hand. "Mom, if you're reading this, something has happened. Everything you need is here." Inside was a USB drive. Upstairs, I played the file. Mark's face appeared on screen, thinner, pale, but still fierce. His voice rasped as he explained. "Stage 4 gastric cancer, no chance of recovery." He had discovered Jennifer's offshore transfers, her lies, her cruelty. "She asked if my life insurance was paid up," he whispered. "I recorded her. I gathered everything. I know you'll do what needs to be done. I love you, Mom." Tears blurred my vision, but discipline steadied me. I opened the files. Account numbers, recordings, transfer receipts, even a revised will, leaving Jennifer only what law required. Most of his estate was directed to a trust for scholarships in architecture. Mark's legacy was secured. The recordings were damning. Jennifer's voice sneered. I married you for financial security. Don't be dramatic. You were fun for a while. Now I have to wait while you waste away." On another, she told Alicia, "Doctor says he won't last long. Already started moving funds. His mother will be surprised when she finds out he left her nothing." I called Martinez immediately. I found a cache of evidence, I told him. Within an hour, he was in Mark's office, watching the video, listening to Jennifer's recorded cruelty. His eyes darkened. This changes everything, he said. We can prove fraud, theft, even exploitation of a disabled adult under Florida law. The next morning, we were back in court for an emergency hearing. Jennifer arrived flawless, her attorney at her side. But when Martinez presented Mark's recordings, the judge's eyes hardened. All assets remain frozen under Colonel Grant's authority, she ruled. Mrs. Grant is prohibited from access. Jennifer's mask cracked as she shouted, "You can't do this. That money is mine." Her fury only confirmed the truth. But the danger was not over. That evening, Jennifer showed up at Mark's door, dressed down, feigning grief. "We're both hurting," she said. "Mark wouldn't want this fighting. Let's settle privately." I let her talk, playing the role Detective Morales had suggested. She offered me $50,000 in exchange for the house, the accounts, and the insurance. "Mark wanted me cared for," she said smoothly. I asked careful questions, steering her into admissions. He knew he was sick for months, she insisted. He refused treatment. By the time he saw doctors, it was too late. Her lies twisted reality. When I mentioned the charitable trust, her smile froze. "That will was made when he was medicated," she snapped. "His real wishes were for me to have everything." I asked about the offshore accounts. She stiffened. "You have nothing but circumstantial grief. My lawyer will destroy you." Her voice wavered when I told her law enforcement already had her in their sights. The flash of panic across her face was worth more than any courtroom victory. After she stormed out, Detective Morales emerged from the back room where he had been monitoring the wired conversation. "We got it," he said with grim satisfaction. "Her admissions about the money, her lies about his treatment, it's enough for an arrest warrant." The next morning, Jennifer was arrested for fraud, grand theft, and exploitation. In her hotel room, they found multiple identities, phones, and evidence of similar schemes across Florida. Martinez called later that day. "Her attorney has withdrawn. We've essentially won the civil case. It should have felt like triumph, but victory was hollow without Mark." 3 days later, I buried him with military honors. His colleagues, neighbors, and even teenagers from the mentorship program he had volunteered with filled the chapel. They wore pins shaped like drafting compasses, tokens of his guidance. They spoke of how he believed in them when others did not. I realized his true legacy was not money or property, but the lives he touched. As the honor guard folded the flag and placed it in my arms, I whispered silently, "Mission complete, Mark. I'll carry this forward." The weeks after the funeral blurred into a routine of paperwork, phone calls, and empty silence in Mark's house. Jennifer remained in custody, denied bail, her charges expanding as investigators uncovered more victims tied to the same criminal ring. Martinez updated me regularly, but the courtroom battles no longer consumed me. Something else had begun to take root in my heart. At the funeral, I had met David Foster, head of the architecture mentorship program where Mark had been volunteering. He told me about the teenagers who looked up to Mark, how he had spent hours each week guiding them through designs, helping them believe they could become architects. I had promised myself I would look into it. A month later, I walked into their renovated warehouse and felt something stir I hadn't felt in weeks. Connection. The space was filled with drawings, models, and laughter. Teenagers hunched over tables, their pencils scratching across paper. Others clustered around computers, learning design software. On the walls, photographs showed Mark teaching, smiling, explaining. Foster led me around with quiet pride. He was our most dedicated mentor, he said. Sometimes twice a week, even when he was sick. The kids adored him. I paused at a photograph of Mark helping a young girl adjust her sketch. His thin frame betrayed how sick he had already been, but his eyes were focused, alive with purpose. "He hid how much pain he was in," I murmured. Foster nodded. He didn't want the kids to see weakness. He wanted them to believe they could do anything. But the program was in danger. Their lease would expire in 3 months. The landlord, planned to sell. Foster admitted Mark had been working on designs for a new space labeled Foster 2.0. I remembered the trust Mark had set aside for education. Suddenly, the path seemed clear. I met with the trustees, adjusted the parameters, and allocated funds to build a permanent home for the program, the Mark Grant Center for Architectural Education. Planning the center became my mission. My military training gave me the discipline to manage budgets, contractors, and deadlines. Veterans transitioning into civilian life joined the project, working as apprentices. Teenagers from the program came often, their excitement infectious. They watched the building rise, walls filling with light spaces shaped for learning. Each nail hammered, each beam raised, felt like a piece of Mark's spirit being built into the structure. Meanwhile, Jennifer's legal fight collapsed. Facing overwhelming evidence, she took a plea deal, 20 years for financial crimes, and an agreement to testify against her co-conspirators. Investigators later confirmed she had tampered with Mark's medications. The rage I once carried turned into something colder, quieter. Justice, as much as the law could provide, had been served. But it didn't bring Mark back. What did bring peace was seeing his legacy thrive. On the day the Mark Grant Center opened, the community gathered to celebrate. Local leaders, students, and mentors filled the building. Photographs of Mark lined the walls, his laughter frozen in time beside the models he had once praised. A plaque by the door read, "Building Dreams, Honoring Service." Teenagers guided guests through the new space, pointing out details they had helped design. One girl, Maya, showed me her sustainable housing project. Another boy, Jamal, spoke proudly of his internship at an architectural firm arranged by Mark before his death. "He believed in us," Maya told me, her voice trembling with sincerity, when no one else did. For the first time since Mark's passing, my chest loosened. His life had not ended with betrayal. It had rippled outward, touching others, leaving something permanent. That night alone, in the quiet of the center, I whispered to his memory, "You built more than buildings, Mark. You built lives." Yet life had more in store. Dr. Chen, the oncologist who had diagnosed Mark, visited the opening. She congratulated me, but her words carried a shadow. "His decline was faster than I expected," she admitted softly. "Now I know why. The tampering explained it. He fought harder than we realized." Then she told me about another patient, a boy named Ethan. 8 years old, fighting leukemia with more bravery than most adults. No family to support him. A child in foster care, spending most of his days alone in the hospital. Her words lingered with me long after she left. That night, I stared at Mark's photo, thinking of the boy. I had lost my only child. But perhaps, just perhaps, there was still someone who needed me. The thought of Ethan stayed with me for days. I learned from Dr. Chen that he had lost his mother to illness, his father imprisoned, and the foster system struggled to place him because of his medical needs. At 8 years old, he spent more time in a hospital bed than in a home. Something in me couldn't let that go. One afternoon, I drove to Naples Children's Hospital and asked about volunteering. The charge nurse smiled wearily. "We always need readers," she said. "Some kids don't have visitors." As she explained, a boy wheeled himself down the hall, small frame swallowed by a NASA t-shirt, dark hair cropped close. His sneakers were bright blue, too energetic for his pale skin. "That's Ethan," the nurse said. He grinned at me, eyes sharp despite the weariness in his face. "You were in the military, weren't you?" he asked. I nodded. 40 years Army? His eyes widened. "Did you ever jump out of airplanes?" I smiled. 17 times. His grin stretched. "Cool. I'm going to be an astronaut. That's why I have to beat this stupid cancer." NASA doesn't take sick kids. In his simple, matter-of-fact words, I heard the same fierce determination that had carried Mark through his life. That afternoon, I read to him from a book about space travel. Other children drifted in, listening quietly. When Ethan finally grew tired and nurses wheeled him back to his room, I found myself promising I'll bring more books tomorrow. Tomorrow became 3 afternoons a week. I brought books about planets, rockets, and astronauts. Ethan shared tricks he'd invented for younger patients, naming medicine Alien Zapper to make the needles less frightening. Even in pain, he thought about others, reminding me of Mark's quiet generosity. Slowly, I realized I wasn't just volunteering. I was forming a bond. Dr. Chen approached me one evening. He'll need more support soon. More than the foster system can provide. We're trying, but he needs stability. Her eyes met mine. Would you consider it? The question hung heavy. I had been a soldier all my life, a mother who missed too many birthdays, a woman who had buried her only child. Could I open my heart again? Was it too late for me to be what a child needed? That night, I sat in Mark's study staring at his photograph. Ethan's laughter echoed in my mind. I thought of the house, Mark's house, too large and too quiet. I thought of the quilt Mrs. Wilson had offered, stitched with stars and planets. I thought of the telescope in Mark's closet, collecting dust. The answer, when it came, was simple. If I had the ability to give Ethan a home, I had the duty. The process wasn't easy. Social workers visited, asked questions about stability, health, and commitment. My record was scrutinized, but my military pension provided financial security. Mark's house offered space. Most of all, for the first time in decades, I had time. I'm not going anywhere, I told them simply. I can give him what he needs. With Martinez and Richard Hayes writing letters of support, doors opened. 3 months later, Ethan wheeled into Mark's house, his new home. I had prepared a bedroom painted deep blue constellations glowing on the ceiling, bookshelves filled with space stories. The telescope sat by the window. Ethan gasped when he saw it. "This is mine," he whispered. "All yours," I said. He smiled, the kind of smile that reaches straight into the heart. That first night, we sat on the porch watching the Gulf sunset. Ethan leaned against me, thin shoulders steady. "Who was Mark?" he asked quietly. I told him about my son, the architect, the mentor, the man betrayed, but never broken. "His room is still his," I explained, "but your room was made for you." Ethan nodded thoughtfully. "That's good. People shouldn't be replaced, but there can be new people too." In that moment, I realized the boy was wiser than many adults I had known. Grief and new beginnings could coexist. Honoring the past did not mean refusing the future. The weeks that followed were not easy. There were hospital visits, long nights of nausea, mornings when he had no strength. But there were also triumphs: his first swim after treatment, his first night at the foster center, where the teenagers cheered him as their junior cadet, his pride at aiming the telescope toward Jupiter. Every small step forward felt like a victory. 6 months after Ethan came home, Jennifer's final sentencing was handed down. 25 years for fraud, exploitation, and confirmed medical tampering. It no longer consumed me. Justice was done. My focus was here on the boy beside me. One evening, Ethan and I walked to the beach at sunset, carrying a photograph of Mark in a wooden frame. We pressed it into the sand, Ethan adding a smooth stone to hold it steady. The tide lapped gently around it. We stood together in silence, letting the waves speak. Finally, Ethan slipped his small hand into mine. "I think he'd like what we did with the place," he said. My throat tightened, but I smiled. "Yes, Ethan, I think he would." Life with Ethan quickly became a rhythm of hope and responsibility. My days were filled with medications, hospital visits, schoolwork at the kitchen table, and nights reading under glow-in-the-dark constellations on his ceiling. It was exhausting, but it was life, and it was ours. The quiet emptiness that once haunted Mark's house slowly gave way to laughter, to questions about galaxies, to the sound of small feet shuffling down the hallway at dawn. The foster center thrived, too. With veterans helping renovate, teenagers designing, and the community donating, the place became more than a building, it became a symbol. Ethan loved visiting, rolling himself between drafting tables, asking the older kids about their projects. They welcomed him like a little brother. Whenever fatigue overtook him, someone was always there to keep him company. Watching them, I realized this was what Mark had dreamed of, not just buildings of steel and stone, but communities built on trust, hope, and care. One afternoon, Dr. Chen pulled me aside. "His treatments are working," she said, a smile breaking her professional calm. "He still has a long road, but the prognosis is far better than we dared hope." Relief washed over me, the kind that feels almost foreign after years of bracing for the worst. Ethan was fighting, and for once the odds seemed to bend in his favor. That evening, as the sun fell over the Gulf, Ethan and I sat on the back porch, the telescope pointed at the rising stars. "Do you miss being a soldier?" he asked suddenly. I thought about the years, the missions, the discipline that had defined me. "I miss parts of it," I admitted, "but serving doesn't end when the uniform comes off. Sometimes service means standing up for family. Sometimes it means building something new." Ethan nodded seriously, as if committing the lesson to memory. "Then I'm going to serve too. First, I'll beat cancer. Then I'll build rockets for NASA. And then I'll come back here and help other kids." His certainty made me smile through tears. The truth settled in my heart. My journey hadn't ended with retirement or with Mark's death. It had simply shifted. Service was not just about duty to country. It was about duty to people, to legacies, to those who couldn't stand alone. In protecting Mark's name, I had uncovered betrayal, faced enemies more insidious than any battlefield, and found something unexpected, purpose renewed through a boy who needed me as much as I needed him. Months later, we returned to the beach with a group from the foster center. Teenagers carried models they had built, little tributes to Mark's vision. Together we placed them in the sand beside his photograph, letting the waves lap gently at their bases. Ethan stood proudly among them, thin but stronger, his compass pin shining on his shirt. For a moment, I felt Mark's presence in the laughter of the children, in the salt wind, in the strength of Ethan's small hand wrapped around mine. As we walked home, I realized grief does not vanish. It becomes part of you, a scar beneath the skin. But scars are proof of survival, proof of battles fought and endured. The lesson Mark left me was not about loss, but about what we choose to build after. Jennifer had tried to destroy his legacy. Instead, she had revealed its strength. Because legacy is not measured in money or possessions. It is measured in lives, touched dreams, nurtured, and love carried forward. That night, I tucked Ethan into bed beneath the quilt stitched with stars. "Good night, Colonel," he said with a sleepy grin, his nickname for me sticking, even when I reminded him I was retired. I kissed his forehead. "Good night, future astronaut." He drifted off, breathing steady, while outside the constellations glowed faintly against his ceiling. For the first time in a long time, I felt peace. Not because the battle was over, but because I had finally understood what it meant to win. Thank you for listening to my story. If it touched your heart, if it reminded you of the strength that lies in love, loyalty, and second chances, please like this video, share it so others can hear it, and subscribe for more stories like this. I'd love to hear from you too. Leave a comment below about what you would have done in my place, or share your own story of resilience and hope.